Jeg heter Marius Holmsen. Jeg jobber i Shift Security. Og Shift Security er et relativt nytt firma, på tross av at vi er en erfaren gjeng. Vi alle har en relativt lang fartstid i bransjen. Og på en måte målet vårt, og en av målsetningene våre, er å være en leder innenfor sikkerhet, og da spesifikt med tanke på SASE eller SSE. I Shift Security så vil vi også ha en del spennende webinarer. I tillegg til det så vil vi også ha det vi kaller for Geek Night, som betyr at i stedet for å bare se på PowerPoint slides og høre oss snakke om teknologi, så får man også muligheten til å teste det selv. Så gå inn på websiden shiftsecurity.no, så vil dere se at vi har både Geek Night på SSE, og ikke minst på CX 10.000-switchen, så vi ser hvordan vi kan gjøre både det jeg kaller for mikro- og nanosegmentering med hjelp av CX-TK-switchen. Yeah, it's a pleasure to kind of be here with you because you've been perceived as one of the thought leaders within the SASE and the SSE space. So how have you seen the I would say demand or the customer interest for the SSE lately? Has it kind of bloomed up? Because I saw somewhere that Gartner predicts that in 2025 80% of the kind of customers will look towards SASE or SSE solutions.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen there be a shift over the last year or 18 months. I think initially when I was out on the road in my role as a field CTO, a lot of what I was doing was explaining to people what SASE architecture was, what the SSE architecture was. That's changing. I think people are starting to understand what SASE is. They're starting to understand what SSE is and how those architectures are made up. I think they're starting to see how that can shift their business in the right way. We're seeing more and more in the press and social media that VPN is or legacy VPNs are a significant risk, and I think that's driving this adoption. I'm seeing people move towards kind of zero trust network access ZTNA, and that's driving that move towards SSE and then towards SASE. Certainly for me, within the SSE architecture, ZTNA is the newest of the technologies. So we're seeing people move away from legacy VPNs and start to adopt ZTNA, and then what they're doing is, as their licenses for the other parts of the architecture expire, like Secure Web Gateway and DLP and CASB and those elements, then they're migrating towards a unified platform. And then that's driving this kind of adoption of SASE. And Gartner have started talking about now what's missing from that architecture. And for me, what I always thought was missing was the on-prem element. And the reason for that was because the architecture really came around in 2021 when everyone was working at home, not in an office.
Yep.
And they're calling it universal ZTNA. So that concept of bringing that single profile, that policy into a single unified platform that covers all of your users and all of your IoT and OT. So I'm certainly seeing it growing. The Nordics are moving pretty quickly, and I think there are some differences across the countries in the Nordics, but it's not the unknown it was 18 months ago.
Right, but when you say the on-prem element, right, because one of the main drivers for me looking into the kind of SASE solution has been that in the old days, and I spent like 20-30 years in the kind of networking industry, right, we always thought about when you invest in your physical on-prem firewall, right, you need to think about what would be the scale limitations and what is the expected growth rate, and you might think about an RTO or basically pay it off over like 5 to 7 years, right? And when we see most of the customers today have a cloud strategy, which means that they seem to cloud native their applications and move them to the public cloud, it also means that there is less demand for that physical appliance on-prem, and it might make sense to have more functionality in the cloud, right? And so what specifically do you think about for the on-prem element in?
I think you've raised a number of interesting points. So certainly there are customers or prospects that I talk to that are fully cloud native, and therefore they need something along the lines of a secure web gateway or a CASB, right? But there are a number of customers or prospects that we deal with that still have some legacy. right? So historically, we would protect our environments with that castle and moat, that external firewall. But everything that was on-prem could go everywhere and do everything. And those are one of the risks around VPN, that they connect you to the network and enable people to go everywhere. But we're living in a world now where people shouldn't trust that on-prem network. And there are ways of making it more secure. We've had things like ACLs, and we've talked about NAC, and we do all of those things. Not everyone has implemented those. But then when you throw in the mix the rise of IoT and OT, and then you've got users that are used to using a ZTNA platform, and then they come on-prem and it goes off, and they can go everywhere and do everything. That's creating this concern around that center, that internal, that on-prem kind of protection. Because if somebody on that network gets compromised, or whether it's by accident or whether they're malicious, they can go everywhere. It's the sins of my past. I created a lot of global MPLS networks and then SD-WAN, and it was really all about efficiency. You wanted your users to really easily and efficiently be able to go everywhere and do everything, because it reduced the amount of support that you had to do. And I think one of the scenarios that I see quite often is when people are moving away from kind of those legacy VPNs, they want to go more and more granular, but they don't know what their users are accessing, even remotely. They don't know, because VPNs gave them access to everything. If you consider, I think as well, the cloud, there was a little bit of resilience or reluctance, I think, initially to go to the cloud. I think the pandemic came along and people started to believe more in the power. Yes, I've seen some people move things to the cloud, and maybe they didn't do it in a tidy and clean way, so they're having to go back and kind of look at that. But definitely people understand the cloud more, but it will take time. That IoT and OT, I don't think is ever fundamentally going to be in the cloud. But there's a power in the cloud as well. Being able to utilize the efficiency and the extra compute and everything that the cloud brings should be, in my mind, seen as a benefit. Relying on those cloud giants, relying on their backbones, relying on the performance that they offer, and not having to feed and water a lot of those things on-prem. So I'm not sure I've answered your question in totality, but I've done my best.
But you did, absolutely. So thank you so much. So one of the key drivers, I understand, for you guys have been the kind of VPN replacement, right? And obviously one of the challenging things with the VPN is from the kind of security perspective, right? Because you open this broad channel and you basically have, a much larger attack surface with VPN. But one of the other things I find is really, really beneficial is that your client connects to the kind of nearest POP, right? Which means that since a lot of customers already migrated some applications to the cloud, it really enhances performance as well, right?
Yeah.
So what have been the most common use cases, or the biggest drivers, I would say, that you have come across with your customers that made them make that transition from VPN to like CTNA? Has it been like performance issues, or has it been the kind of more kind of security related issues?
I think, to be honest, it's a blend of both. I think the driving force behind moving towards a ZTNA platform is primarily security. I think, as I've said before, I think we've seen a lot of compromises happen with what I would call the legacy vendors. But when you also consider that the default configuration for a VPN is to backhaul all traffic. So a good example is, you wake up in the morning, you're working at home, you connect over the internet into the VPN, you traverse through a whole bunch of on-prem solutions only to jump on a VDI and go out to something like Salesforce or Office 365. So if you look and consider just ZTNA, there's power in connecting the users granularly to the service or application they need without that backhauling. So if somebody is working at home and they need to access a SaaS platform, they can go through the cloud, be protected, and go straight to that SaaS platform. For us, over the hyperscaler networks. So really quick performance. But if they need to go on-prem, they will go to the lowest possible POP. they will then go in through a connector and get access to that on-prem, whatever that might be, whether that's their SSH in or it's a file server or whatever it might be. The power in our platform and how it was created was really to resolve third-party and contractor access without an agent. But then on top of that, we built an agent, and then on top of that, we built out the rest of the SSE architecture. Then we were acquired by HPE and combined with the SD-WAN offerings to create SASE. It's a blend of user experience and security. And really that to me is what the SASE architecture is all about, is bringing networking together with security. Therefore the performant element of multiple connections and fast access and all of that, but tying in security as well. And I think when I sit down and talk to people within customers or prospects, it depends who I'm talking to. If it's the infrastructure team, they want fast connectivity. If it's the CISO or the security team, they want it to be secure. And really, in my mind, that's what ZTNA offers.
Yep.
I think it's worth pointing out that a lot of people get concerned about replacing their VPN. As we spoke about before, VPN offers that open access to everything, and therefore people don't necessarily know how to replace it. It's how do I take that first step? I don't want to cause issues with the business in regards to downtime because I've missed maybe a configuration that the user or access that the user had. So we offer kind of a solution to that, which is give broad access initially, then being able to review what access exists and what access the users and their devices are doing, and then go more granular. So being able to show within the platform these users or these group of users are accessing these applications. We were working with a large banking organization in the UK that originally said we want to go application by application because we have about 400 applications.
Wow.
When they got to 800 applications and they realized it wasn't 400, they asked us for some help, and in the end they ended up having more than 4,000 applications that people were accessing. So that is a concern for people, is how to start that journey.
Yeah. And one thing I would like to point out that I find really, interesting about your solution and a main benefit is that a lot of customers I talk to might have some temporarily employees, or they might have some third-party contractors, right? And in the old days, they used to give them VPN clients and have them, basically connect in, which gave them much broader access than what they really required, right? And the clientless access portal, I believe you can do HTTP, HTTPS, RDP sort of applications, right? Which means that you can certainly map out some specific application that they might need, and you can also specify the time period that will be available, right? So it's a much more granular and scalable solution compared to handing out VPN clients.
Yeah, I mean, I spent most of my working life working for manufacturing companies, and we always used to have a lot of third parties and contractors, and even BYOD became a thing. So those devices that you can't control, you don't patch, they're not corporate, you don't own them. So for me, deploying a VPN client to those devices was pretty scary, because a lot of the time those third parties and contractors would also work for other companies. And they may well need to run multiple VPNs, and if they ran those VPNs at the same time, you were basically connecting networks, or they would also have conflicts around those technologies. So that is really where Access, the company that HPE acquired, was born, was to resolve that specific problem. So therefore, yes, we have a portal that you can use for SSH and RDP, but we also have native client support, which is one of the big strengths, is not having to use that portal. Being able to let those third parties and contractors use the tools that they're familiar with. A lot of the time, they don't want to go via a web browser. They want to continue using their PuTTY or their whatever it might be, their equivalent tool that they're familiar with. And therefore, being able to give that granular access with specific time frames, whether it's hours of the day or weekends, or whether it's for 30 days, being able to go really quite granular and give access just from that particular user to that particular application, to me is really that differentiator. And a lot of our our customers start their journey there. They realize there's a risk around that legacy VPN that we've talked about, and they think their biggest risks are those non-corporate devices from those users that, like I said, you can't really control what they're doing.
So as we're approaching the end here, right, I just want to point out a few things that I find really appealing with your solution, right? Specifically, if you think about a lot of customers that might be used to, deploying firewall rules on a legacy firewall, have their VPN concentrators to terminate VPN, might find it, challenging to kind of grasp this new SASE and SSE concept, right? But having that single management, that single management UI, that you basically have one single point of management, is really beneficial, right? And how would you also describe your solution compared to some of the other solutions out there in the market? I'm thinking more like you see some of these more legacy vendors now come up with like SASE and SSE solutions, but I think you guys were fully born as a SSE solution, right?
Yeah, in the cloud as well. So when I speak to CISOs, their kind of number one priority is to reduce the complexity, reduce the number of vendors they are working with, because statistics show that it's anywhere between 50 and 75 tools that they have to use. So as much as we talk about SASE and SSE being architectures, Gartner are talking about single vendor SASE. So our solution from an SSE point of view and the vision through the wider HPE portfolio is to unify a lot of what we do. It's to have it in a single user interface. So currently now within the SSE area, we have extremely powerful ZTNA that we've talked about, but you can also configure Secure Web Gateway, CASB, DLP. We have digital experience monitoring, i.e. visibility across the whole platform. And it's all in that single user interface, single data lake, single code base. So the next step in what we've already done a lot of work on is to unify that with our SD-WAN offerings so that you can control and see that visibility across the whole platform. And then the next step is to do that concept of universal ZTNA. Being able to bring the other tools we have in play across our arsenal and being able to do zero trust everywhere, I call it. Okay, so being born in the cloud, we can rely on that cloud acceleration across the networks as well, so we can use Global Accelerator and all of those things. So truly we are going down the route of simplicity so that you have that single policy, single control, single visibility across all of your users and devices, and even headless devices. And that's really that driving factor of bringing all of those pieces of the puzzle together and using like I said, the accelerated networks, the backbone of the hypervisors, because it is that simplicity, but also in mind user experience.
Yeah. So how has that, journey been transforming those more traditional firewall operators, right? That to introduce like the secure web gateway and use the CASB policies. I mean, did they find it intuitive or is there like a steep learning curve?
No, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I mentioned this before, but within the SSE architecture, it's really ZTNA is the main new different technology. Moving away from VPN, I've mentioned that we have tools to help people with that because that is the more of the complicated kind of journey. When it comes to things like Secure Web Gateway and CASB, they're all older technologies. They've been around for a while. They generally are really around categorization and visibility into what people are accessing within the web and what people are accessing within SaaS tools and that control. We have tools that will help people migrate away from those, being able to take the categorization work that they've already done, being able to take some of the rules they've already done. But it's really, for me, Secure Web Gateway and CASB are very similar. One's about controlling internet and one's about controlling cloud. But being able to bring those into one platform and being able to control that access from the user and their device to those tools and being able to give that visibility is pretty differentiated. So it's not complicated to migrate. We tend to advise that people don't migrate. And the reason we say that is it's a bit like when you move house. You put everything in boxes, you move those boxes, you put them in your garage or in your loft. 10 years later, you move again. You take those boxes that you've never
Same
unpacked
boxes, yeah.
and move them.
Yeah.
So we don't necessarily want people to move and create the same mess as they've already had. The whole concept of the single policy and single place and single control is to tidy things up. But we help people on that journey as well. So you can move those things, but we'll just sit with you and make sure you unpack those boxes and decide, do you need that any longer? Because if you look at a firewall and you look at the number of rules within a firewall, I can guarantee that most people don't know what they're there for. Why move the mess? Why don't you start from scratch? And actually, it's relatively straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, like I've seen customers have like, hundred thousands or even millions of rules in the firewall. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. So let me just briefly at the end kind of remind people that instead of listening to us talk about how they kind of configure the SSE, so there's an opportunity to come to see us at the Geek Night and you'll be able to kind of try it out yourself. So hope this says that.